quickly, because the anti-whites, like everything, have deformed Thanksgiving and the meaning of Thanksgiving to fit the anti-white narrative. And now Thanksgiving essentially means what, ladies and gentlemen? Thanksgiving in the United States now means that white people showed up to this continent, and it was already a country magically. And we just showed up here to thieve it from the American Indians. And we didn't know how to do anything. We didn't know how to build structures. We didn't know how to feed ourselves. We didn't know how to hunt. We didn't know how to farm. And we had a couple little skills maybe, but really just couldn't get by. And fortunately, the American Indians descended on us, not with tomahawks, raping and gang raping. And all of this may or may not be true, ladies and gentlemen. You'll have to look it up for yourself. But they didn't descend on us that way. No. They descended on us with just cornucopias of food and instruction and care for our injuries. And that is now what Thanksgiving means. It means celebrating multiracialism, because the American Indians came to the poor white people who were just absolutely squalid and benighted in our ways, and they saved us from that. And then, of course, if you follow the anti-white narrative, you find out that we betrayed them, and then we genocided them, but they're still in existence, but somehow we also genocided them, and now we have a country that we stole from them. That's the new story of Thanksgiving. Here's the real story of Thanksgiving that you will share with your friends and family this Thanksgiving if they try to give you that garbage from anti-white narrative. The real story about Thanksgiving is this. People wanted to worship Jesus Christ and Christianity in whatever way that they saw fit. They weren't allowed to do that where they lived, so they left. They came to the United States, and they believed that they were the chosen people and that the United States was the promised land in the Bible. They gave thanks to Jesus Christ and God, the God of Christianity. That is the original meaning of Thanksgiving. Now, if you want to tack something onto that, you can tack this on just in a general sense. And we in the white positive sphere can do anything we want with it, because we are pinning the story on the blank pages of our book now. So we can write anything we want into Thanksgiving in the future. There becomes enough of us, and Thanksgiving will be a worldwide phenomenon, and it'll mean something very different for Western kind. But if you wanted to tack something onto that original meaning, which was coming to the promised land, being able of finding the promised land, the chosen people for the promised land, and thanking God, giving thanks to God for that discovery, bringing them to the promised land. If you want to tack anything on, it's this, that the idea of socialism that was practiced by these original colonists was an enormous failure. Now, you can have other definitions of socialism. There are a great many definitions of socialism out there. The type of socialism practiced by the colonists was an utter failure, because what ended up happening in these colonies? They had different groups of people that did all of that. You were tasked with doing X, you were tasked with doing Y. Everybody had to put their things in the big barn, and then everybody got to go to the barn whenever they needed something. What type of environment does that create? It doesn't take a lot of intelligence. It creates an environment where people are incentivized to come up with excuses not to work, to just live on the system, to be able to take from the barn whenever they need it. So in the journals of the governors of these different groups all along the eastern seaboard, they were writing about these mayors, governors, whatever they're called, in all of their journals, whatever their titles were. They were writing about how the entire colony was falling apart. More and more people were malingering. They didn't want to work. They wanted to just take. People were starting to starve. And so every single one of them, independent of each other, started implementing the strategy that would work, which was, if you farm and you grow grain and you milk cows, you get to keep it. And that meant the malingerers had to get off their asses and get to work, or they were going to starve to death. So if you want to tack anything on to the actual meaning of Thanksgiving, it is that that particular type of socialism that was applied by the colonists in the early country before the United States even existed, that they practiced a particular type of socialism that was the ruination of them. Had they stuck with it, they would have all died. It's that simple. That is the meaning of Thanksgiving. Share that with friends and family who try to tell you that it is this new version, and then tell them why they are being told this new version, where that comes from, because that will help them to go free. That will help them to understand. I mean, you can go to these places in Virginia, in North Carolina, these places where the earliest colonies were, and you can see how they have changed the history. They just absolutely rewritten the history. We're going to be talking about that with the Holodomor in just a moment, where they have totally rewritten history to mean something different than it, and to be something totally different than it was originally, so that it suits the anti-white narrative, so that it works out to your detriment. And if you take an element of that story, and this is what all the conservative and nationalist losers do, is they'll take the anti-white story and they'll pluck some element out of it, and they'll say, well, let me try to argue that element of their story. You lose every time. Do not go into their story at all. Their story is a great big lie. That's all it is. And make sure you tell your friends and family exactly that. Let me jump on to this tweet that was by NK a little earlier. We'll talk about that because it absolutely infuriates me, and I wanted to mention it even though I was running out of time. We've got a lot to talk about.